Andre Washington was 38 years old when his wife sat him down in the living room and told him she needed someone better, someone who could match where she was going. She said it without flinching. She had rehearsed it. For 14 months, while Andre cooked dinner, called his father on Sundays, and trusted his wife with their joint finances, Diane had been quietly building her exit. A signed divorce petition already drafted, a secret LLC funded with their shared money, and a man named Troy Mitchell waiting on the other side of a life she had already chosen. She filed. The marriage ended, and Diane walked away certain she had traded up. What she didn't account for was the man she left behind. Andre didn't beg. He didn't break. He didn't chase her. He simply got quiet. The particular quiet of a man who notices everything and says nothing until the moment is exactly right. 2 years later, Diane was still alone. Troy was gone, and Andre was sliding a ring across a restaurant table toward the woman who had been in his corner the entire time. But that ending didn't arrive by accident. It was built, the same way Andre built everything. Deliberately, precisely, and from a foundation Diane never knew existed. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The cast iron skillet had been his grandmother's. Andre knew that every time he picked it up, felt it in his shoulder, the way real weight always announces itself honestly. He'd seasoned it himself over 4 years of Sunday mornings, built up its surface layer by patient layer until it was black and smooth as river stone. His grandmother would have approved. She was a woman who believed that useful things deserved to be cared for. He moved around the kitchen the way he moved through most of his life, without waste, without hurry. The garlic went in first, the way it should. He listened to it hiss and pop in the oil, while Marvin Gaye moved quietly through the speaker on the counter, "Let's Get It On," fading into something slower, something that suited the Tuesday evening light coming through the window above the sink. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and cast iron, and a good life. Andre Washington was, by most honest measures, a man who had built something worth having. He was 38 years old. He had designed 3 buildings this year: a mixed-use development downtown, a fire station in the East District, and a school addition that he was quietly the most proud of. Structural engineering was, at its heart, the art of understanding what holds things up. Andre was very good at it. He had a reputation at his firm for being the man you brought in when something complicated needed to be made to last. He turned the chicken, checked the clock. Diane was late. That wasn't new. He noted it the same way he noted everything, without judgment, without alarm, just filed. He turned the heat down a degree and reached into the cabinet for 2 plates, the good ceramic ones she liked, and set the table the way he always did. Placemats straight, glasses filled, her coffee ready in the small carafe on the counter, because Diane did not drink water with dinner, and she did not drink wine on weeknights, and she took her coffee with oat milk and 1½ spoons of sugar, and Andre had known that for so long it required no thought whatsoever. He called his father every Sunday at 6 o'clock. Had for 11 years, since the day he moved out of Walter's house and into his first apartment with 2 boxes of clothes and his grandmother's skillet. Walter Washington was 68, a retired union carpenter with large hands and a small vocabulary, and the particular kind of wisdom that only comes from building real things for 40 years. Their Sunday calls lasted between 12 and 40 minutes, depending on what was happening in the world and how the ball game had gone. Andre never missed one. He heard Diane's key in the lock at 7:42. "Hey." She came in without looking up, dropped her bag on the bench by the door, shrugged out of her jacket. "Hey," Andre said. "Dinner's ready. Sit down. I'll plate it." She did sit. She poured herself some water, not coffee, he noticed, and looked at her phone once before she set it face down on the table. "This smells good," she said, when he set the plate in front of her. Like she was a dinner guest, like she was complimenting a restaurant. "Rosemary chicken," he said. "Same as last month. You liked it." "Right." She smiled at him. The smile landed a little short of her eyes. "I remember." They ate. He asked about her day. She gave him the outline of it: a meeting, a difficult client, traffic on the bridge, the way you'd summarize a day for someone who didn't need the details. He listened. He told her about the school project, about the load-bearing calculations that had taken up most of his afternoon, and she nodded in the right places. Halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed against the table. "Sorry," she said, and picked it up. She looked at the screen, and something moved across her face. Quick, almost invisible, a loosening, like a held breath released. "I need to take this." She was already standing. "1 second." She went down the hall toward the bedroom and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. Andre sat still and listened to the muffled sound of her voice through the wall. He couldn't make out the words. He didn't need to. What reached him was enough. The register of it, the way it moved, easy and private, the way a laugh sounds when nobody's performing it for anyone. Low, warm, belonging entirely to whoever was on the other end of that call. He cut a piece of chicken, chewed, set his fork down. He was a structural engineer. He understood, professionally and personally, that the first signs of failure in a structure were almost never dramatic. No sudden collapse, no loud crack. Just small things. A hairline fracture in the wrong place. A measurement that was off by a degree. Details that didn't add up, accumulating quietly, invisible to anyone who wasn't trained to look. Andre was very trained to look. Diane came back to the table 7 minutes later. She apologized. She finished her dinner. She said she was tired and went to bed before 9. Andre stayed at the table. The house settled around him. The speaker had gone quiet. The overhead light was a little too bright for the hour, and the 2 plates were still on the table, hers half finished, his cleaned, and the coffee carafe sat on the counter, full, untouched. He sat with his hands around his water glass. He listened to the silence. It was his house. He knew every sound it made, every way the air moved through it, every particular creak of the hallway floor. He had chosen it. He had made the down payment. He had painted the kitchen himself over a long weekend 3 summers ago, while Diane was visiting her mother. He knew this house. But sitting here now, in the Tuesday night quiet, with Marvin Gaye gone and Diane's laugh still hanging somewhere in the back of his mind like a note played in the wrong key, it didn't feel entirely like his anymore. The water heater announced its problem the way most problems did. Not all at once, but gradually, then undeniably. Andre had noticed the pressure dropping in the shower 2 mornings in a row. On the 3rd morning, it was cold. He stood under it anyway, thinking, letting the shock of it work on him while he ran through what it would need. Probably the heating element, possibly the thermostat. Either way, he would need the warranty paperwork to find the model number and the service contact. The home office was the 2nd door on the left. Diane was already gone by the time he got there. Early meeting, she'd said the night before. He had nodded and asked her if she wanted coffee, and she said she'd grab something on the way, and the door had closed behind her at 7:12. He sat down at the filing cabinet and pulled open the 2nd drawer, where they kept the house documents. His fingers walked through the folders the way they always did. Mortgage, insurance, appliances, receipts, organized by his hand years ago. He had always been the one who kept things in order. He found the appliances folder. He pulled it out. Behind it, pushed flat against the back of the drawer, was a manila envelope. He almost missed it. It had been filed behind a folder labeled Medical, 2019, which he had no reason to open. If the water heater had broken in any other way, on any other morning, he might have gone directly to the appliances folder and pulled it free without ever pressing far enough back to feel the edge of that envelope against his knuckles. He pulled it out. His name was on nothing on the outside. No label, no writing, just a plain 9 by 12 manila envelope, sealed and then unsealed. The metal clasp bent back. He opened it. It was a divorce petition, fully completed. Every line filled in with Diane's careful, slanted handwriting. His name appeared in the section marked Respondent. Hers appeared as Petitioner. The grounds were listed as irreconcilable differences. The date at the top of the first page was 14 months ago. He sat down on the floor. He read every page. She had listed the house. She had listed the joint investment account. She had listed his pension. His pension, the one he had been building for 16 years through work that had nothing to do with her, and noted it as a marital asset subject to division. She had done her homework. The paperwork was thorough, careful, and completely filled out all the way to the signature line, where her name sat in ink. 14 months ago. He turned to the last page and looked at the date for a long time. Then he put every page back in the envelope exactly as he found it. He pressed the metal clasp back down the way it had been. He returned the envelope to the back of the drawer behind the medical 2019 folder. He returned the appliances folder to its place. He found the warranty paperwork for the water heater. He went downstairs and fixed it himself. It was the heating element, as he suspected. He had the right tools. It took 40 minutes. He cleaned up after himself, washed his hands, and made a cup of coffee, and drank it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the backyard. That night, he lay beside Diane in the dark, with his hands folded on his chest, and listened to her breathing slow into sleep. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. He was a man who understood structures. He understood that when you discovered a crack, the worst thing you could do was make noise about it before you knew how deep it went. You had to trace it first. You had to understand where it started, and what it was connected to, and what else might come down if you moved wrong. He was not going to move wrong. By the time Diane's breathing deepened beside him, Andre had made exactly one decision. He would not react. He would prepare. He found the email account on the third day. Diane had stored the login in their shared browser. A small carelessness, the kind of thing a person did when they were certain the other person would never think to look. Andre had been using the home laptop to pull a PDF from his firm's server when he noticed a saved account in the email drop-down that he didn't recognize, a Gmail address with no name attached, just a string of letters and numbers. He sat with his hands on the keyboard for a moment. Then he opened it. 22 months of emails between Diane and a man named Troy Mitchell. He read them in order, starting from the beginning. By the time he was an hour in, he understood that this was not simply an affair. Troy Mitchell was a real estate developer. The early emails were personal, too personal, intimate in a way that sat in Andre's chest like a stone. But they shifted, gradually, into something more operational. Asset planning, conversations about how things would be divided. Troy advising Diane on what to protect, what to move, how to structure things so that the settlement would land in her favor. 9 months ago, Diane had formed a private LLC. Troy's name was on the formation documents, attached as a photo in one of the emails. The LLC had received money. Andre could see the amounts referenced in the thread. In small, consistent transfers. Never large enough to notice. Never irregular enough to flag. Pulled, he understood now, from the joint household account that Diane had always managed because Andre had trusted her to. He sat in the dark of the home office for a long time. He closed the laptop. He picked up his phone, pulled up a name he had not called since December. Camille answered on the second ring. "Andre?" she said. Just his name. Like she already knew something had shifted. "Hey," he said. "I need to talk to you. When are you free?" Camille's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old coffee and printer toner. She had worked there for 11 years. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and whiteboards covered in numbers, and the desk was large and functional and buried under organized stacks of paper that only made sense to her. Andre arrived at 8:15. She had a coffee waiting for him. He sat down across from her, set his phone face down on the desk, and told her everything. He did it the way he did most things, in order, without editorializing, moving from one fact to the next, the way you'd walk a colleague through a structural report. The petition first, the date, what it listed, then the email account, the 22 months, Troy Mitchell, the LLC, the transfers from the joint account. He did not raise his voice. He did not look away. He held his coffee with both hands and spoke in the same even tone he used when he was explaining load calculations to a contractor who'd asked the wrong question. Camille listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled a legal pad across the desk and said, "Tell me the name of the LLC again." He told her. She wrote it down. She asked 3 more questions: the approximate transfer amounts, the rough timeline, whether Troy's name appeared on the formation documents as a member or a registered agent. Andre answered all 3 without hesitating. Camille set down her pen. "Andre," she said, "this isn't impulse. This isn't a woman who got unhappy and made bad decisions." She tapped the legal pad once with her finger. "This is premeditation. Somebody planned this, carefully." He nodded. He had already known that. But there was something different about hearing it said out loud by someone who followed money for a living. Someone who had no reason to soften it. "How long will it take you to build the full picture?" he asked. "Depends on what I can access. But give me time." She looked at him steadily. "I'll find it all." He picked up his coffee. "I know you will." He called 3 divorce attorneys that week. The first one was recommended by a colleague. She was competent and calm and told him the process would likely be straightforward, given that there were no children. He thanked her and did not call back. The second one had an office full of plaques and spoke mostly about himself. Andre left after 20 minutes. The third one, a man named Gerald Holt, whose name had come up twice in separate conversations Andre had had over the years, always in the context of being described as someone the other side did not want to see across a table, met him in a small office with no plaques, a single window, and a habit of asking questions and then waiting as long as it took to hear the full answer. Andre told him what he had found. Gerald Holt asked 2 questions, took 4 pages of notes, and then said, "Don't tell her anything. Don't change your behavior. Don't move any money. Just come home." Andre hired him the next day. He came home. He cooked dinner. He asked about her day. Diane talked about a project at work, a disagreement with her supervisor, a restaurant she had gone to for lunch that she thought he might like. She was warm in the particular way she sometimes was when she had something on her mind. Compensating, he now understood. Filling space. He listened. He asked follow-up questions. He cleared the plates. He did this for 2 weeks. On a Thursday evening, Diane asked him to sit down with her in the living room. She had chosen the chair across from the couch, which meant she had thought about where she would be standing when she said what she was about to say. Andre noticed this. He sat on the couch and folded his hands in his lap and waited. She had clearly rehearsed it. The opening was smooth. She loved him, she said. That had never been the question. And she moved through it with the composure of a woman who had practiced in the mirror. She had grown, she said. She had changed direction. She needed things that were different now. Then she got to the part she had saved. "I need someone better, Andre." She held his gaze when she said it. Steady, certain, someone who can match where I'm going. The room was quiet. Andre looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the envelope in the filing cabinet. He thought about 22 months of emails. He thought about small transfers, repeated, patient, invisible. He thought about the petition with his name in the respondent line, dated 14 months ago, Sitting behind a folder he had no reason to open, he said, "All right, I'll have my attorney contact yours." Diane blinked, just once, a small fracture in the composure. She had expected something else. He could see her recalibrating, looking for the reaction that hadn't come. The tears, maybe. The questions. The reaching. There was nothing to reach for. The door had already closed. It had just done it quietly. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday in March. Andre signed the last document, shook Gerald Holt's hand in the parking garage, and drove home in silence. 23 months later. Diane's apartment was a one-bedroom on the third floor of a complex off the interstate. She had a lease. Troy had ended things 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Efficiently, the way he did most things, with a phone call and no real explanation. She had not seen him since. The restaurant Andre had chosen was quiet and warm. White tablecloths, candles low. The kind of place that felt like a decision. He waited until Camille had set down her wine glass. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and slid the ring box across the table toward her. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Camille opened the box. She was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that wasn't uncertainty, just a person letting something real settle into them before they answered. She looked back up at him. "Yes," she said. The coffee was still hot when Camille set the folder on the table. It was a thick folder, dark green, the kind with the metal clasp at the top. She had written nothing on the outside of it. She didn't need to. Andre knew what it was the moment she put it down. Her kitchen was small and bright. Morning light came through the window above the sink and landed across the table in a wide, pale stripe. There were 2 mugs, a sugar bowl, and a spoon resting on a folded paper towel. Everything exactly in its place. The way Camille kept things. Andre had slept, which had surprised him. He'd expected to lie awake turning the ring over in his mind, replaying the restaurant, the quiet moment before she answered. Instead, he had slept clean and deep, and woken up feeling like a man who had somewhere solid to stand. They had not talked much yet this morning. That was fine. They were comfortable enough with silence now that it didn't require filling. Camille sat across from him, curled both hands around her mug, and looked at the folder. "I want to walk you through it from the beginning," she said. "Okay." She opened the clasp. She started with the LLC. He already knew the shape of it, the name, the formation date, the transfers. But Camille had spent 23 months filling in what he couldn't see from the outside, and what she laid in front of him now was something different from what he'd found in that secondary email account. That had been a sketch. This was the full drawing. The LLC had been the outer layer, the mechanism. The place the small transfers from the joint account eventually landed, laundered through ordinary-looking line items that would have meant nothing to someone who wasn't specifically looking. But the LLC wasn't the point, Camille said. She pulled a stapled set of documents from the folder and slid them across to him. This is what it was protecting. Andre picked up the papers. It was a property record, a duplex, a suburb about 14 miles out, a quiet area, the kind of neighborhood where rents were steady and tenants stayed, the kind of property a careful person would choose if they were thinking about income, not flash, registered solely in Diane's name. He looked up. "She used the joint investment account," Camille said. "Not the household fund, the investment account. Smaller withdrawals, spread over about 9 months, routed through the LLC. Clean enough that it looked like regular portfolio rebalancing to anyone who wasn't tracing the destination." She paused. "I traced the destination." Andre set the papers down. "When?" he asked. Camille looked at him steadily. "The acquisition started 26 months into your marriage?" The stripe of morning light sat between them on the table. Andre didn't move. 26 months. He had been 30 years old. They had just repainted the bedroom. He had been working late on the structural plans for the Meridian project. coming home tired, eating whatever was in the refrigerator, believing entirely in the life he was inside of. "That's 8 years ago," he said. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, not processing. He processed fast, always had, but sitting with the specific weight of it, the shape of what it meant. This wasn't a woman who had grown unhappy. This wasn't a marriage that had drifted and soured and produced someone desperate enough to take a bad exit. Diane had looked at what they were building together, early, deliberately, with clear eyes, and made a private decision that what was his was useful to her, and what was hers was going to stay that way. She had not fallen out of love with him. She had never intended to stay. Troy hadn't changed the plan. Troy was just the next piece of it. The social cover. The connection with the right kind of money. Andre reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, which was hanging on the back of the chair, and took out his leather notebook. He opened it to a clean page. He uncapped the pen he kept clipped to the cover. "Walk me through the documentation," he said. "All of it." Camille did. It took 40 minutes. She was thorough and precise, the way she was with everything, and Andre wrote in the notebook in his small, even handwriting, dates, amounts, account numbers, the names on the formation documents, the property address, the rental structure Diane had established. He did not editorialize. He did not ask questions that were really just anger looking for a place to land. He asked clarifying questions. He wrote down the answers. When she finished, he looked over the 2 pages of notes, then looked up. "Can you format all of this the way Gerald Holt will need it?" "Already started," Camille said. "I'll have a clean version to you by end of week." He nodded. He closed the notebook. "Thank you," he said. And he meant it the way he meant most things, completely, without decoration. Camille looked at him across the table. She didn't say anything. She reached forward and set her hand over his. Andre turned his hand over and held it. Outside the kitchen window, the morning was still going. Unhurried. Neither of them moved to interrupt it. Diane called at 8:47 in the morning. Troy did not answer. She called again at 9:03. Then at 9:21. The phone sat face up on his kitchen counter, lit and buzzing, and Troy Mitchell stood at the window with his espresso and watched a crew down on the street unloading lumber from a flatbed. He watched until the calls stopped. Then he picked up the phone, cleared the notifications, and set it back down. He was not a man who tortured himself over these things. That was the advantage of having made the same kind of decision before. The first time was uncomfortable. The second time was a habit. And after that, it was simply maintenance. Diane was not the first woman who had believed their situation was more durable than it was. She would not be the last. His attorney had been direct. "Your name is on that LLC. Distance yourself. Now. And keep it clean." Troy had kept it clean. Diane held the phone in her lap for a long time after the last call went unanswered. She was sitting on the small couch in the lease apartment, the one she had chosen quickly, after the divorce, telling herself it was temporary. A starting point. She had not thought of it as temporary in some time now, but she had not yet let herself stop. The apartment was nice enough. Clean, south-facing, good light in the mornings. She had arranged it carefully. There were framed prints on the walls, and a real coffee maker on the counter, and a rug she had paid too much for, because she needed at least one thing to feel like a choice. She called Patricia. Her mother picked up on the second ring, the way she always did, as if she had been waiting but didn't want to seem like it. "Hey, baby." "Hey, Mom." A pause. Patricia had learned, somewhere in the last year, to let Diane fill the silences first. "He's not answering," Diane said. Patricia didn't ask who. "How long has that been going on?" "A few weeks?" It had been longer than a few weeks. Patricia probably knew that, too. "Diane." Her mother's voice was careful, level. The tone she used when she was about to say something she'd been holding. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay." When did things with Troy start? Before or after you filed that paperwork? The air in the apartment seemed to shift slightly. What paperwork? Don't do that, Patricia said. Not harshly, just plainly. I'm your mother. Don't do that with me. Diane was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, a car alarm went off and then stopped. Things were complicated, she said. In the marriage. You know they were. I know what you told me. Mom, the petition was drafted 14 months before you served him. Patricia said it evenly, like she was reading from a document. Maybe she was. Patricia had always been organized. I want to understand what was happening 14 months before that. In your marriage. In your head. Because I've been sitting with this for a while now, and the timeline doesn't add up the way you presented it to me. Diane shifted on the couch. I don't really want to get into all of this right now. I know you don't. A breath. Call me when you do. Patricia hung up first. In a building 11 blocks north of the apartment where Diane sat with her silent phone, in an office with a glass door and a view of the parking structure, a paralegal from Gerald Holt's firm had dropped off a sealed envelope 3 days earlier. The envelope had been signed for by Troy Mitchell's office manager, logged, and placed in the stack on the credenza outside his private office, where it waited until Troy arrived, sorted through the pile, and got to it. He almost set it aside. The return address, a law firm name, Holt and Associates, meant nothing to him at first glance. He got legal correspondence the way anyone in real estate development did. Regularly. Most of it was routine. He opened it. He read the first page standing up. Then he sat down. Then he read it again. His name. The LLC name. The specific account routing numbers he had helped Diane set up. The civil claim filed on behalf of Andre Washington, represented by Gerald A. Holt, asserting fraud in the misappropriation of joint marital funds. The attached exhibit referenced forensic accounting documentation prepared by an independent specialist. Troy sat very still at his desk. Then he picked up his phone. Not to check if Diane had called again. To call his attorney. The line rang twice. Marcus, Troy said, when the man picked up. I need you to look at something. His voice was steady. It was always steady. He had trained it to be, over years of deals and negotiations and rooms where the first man to show discomfort lost the advantage. But there was something underneath it now. Quiet and unfamiliar. Something that had not been there before. Walter's Street was the kind of quiet that didn't come from nothing happening. It came from everything having already happened. The kids grown and gone. The arguments settled. The ambitions reduced to something manageable and, in that reduction, finally true. The houses on the block were small and well kept, with concrete stoops and chain-link fences and the occasional rose bush somebody's wife had planted 30 years ago, and nobody had the heart to pull out. Andre pulled up to the curb at just past 11 in the morning. His father was already on the porch. Walter Washington, at 68, was a compact man, built close to the ground, with hands that were wide across the knuckles and permanently stained at the creases from 40 years of union work. He was sitting in the low wooden chair he'd had since before Andre could remember, bent slightly forward over the small workbench he'd rigged up from an old TV tray and a piece of plywood. A birdhouse in progress sat in front of him. Pine boards, a tin roof, clean corner joints. He was sanding one of the side panels with the kind of attention most people reserved for things worth far more than a birdhouse. He looked up when Andre came up the porch steps. He did not look surprised. "Thought you might come by," Walter said. "You thought right." Andre took the chair beside him, the old wicker one that creaked when you first sat and then settled. "How's the knee?" "Same as last week." "Which means?" "Which means it works when I need it to, and complains when I stop." Walter turned the panel over in his hands. "You eat?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." "I had coffee." Walter nodded like that was exactly the wrong answer he expected, then stood and went inside without comment. He came back with a plate of toast and a glass of water, set it on the workbench next to the birdhouse, and sat back down. Andrei ate. Walter sanded. The street was quiet. A pigeon walked along the top of the fence across the road with the purposeful energy of a bird that had somewhere to be. They talked about Andrei's Firm First, a new project coming in, a school in the east part of the city, complicated site conditions. Walter asked the right questions. He had always understood construction, even the parts that happened on paper. Then they talked about the neighborhood. The corner store had changed hands again. The family 2 doors down had put in a driveway that was slightly over the property line, and nobody had said anything yet, but somebody would. Then they talked about the game from Thursday. The Bucks, a rough fourth quarter, a coach's decision that Walter had opinions about and expressed with the calm authority of a man who had watched basketball for 50 years and had earned the right to be right about it. The birdhouse panel got smoother. The plate got empty. Then Walter set down the sandpaper. He didn't make a production of it. He just set it down and looked out at the street for a moment. And then he turned and looked at his son. "You doing all right, son?" he said. "For real?" Andrei looked at the empty plate. The honest answer had been sitting in his chest for a long time. Not the version he gave Camille, which was true, but organized, clinical, shaped for a purpose. The other one, the one underneath. "No," he said. "Not entirely." Walter waited. "I keep thinking about the years," Andrei said. "Not the money, not the LLC, not Troy, not any of that. I can handle that. That's just paperwork with consequences attached." He paused. "I keep thinking about the years I spent believing in it, genuinely believing, coming home and cooking dinner and thinking, this is real, this is mine. I built this." He exhaled slowly, and she was sitting across the table from me the whole time, knowing she was already gone, knowing it for years. He stopped. It was the most he had said out loud about any of it to anyone. Walter didn't rush in to fill the space. He just sat with it, the way he sat with everything. Unhurried, present, like silence was not something to be afraid of. After a moment, he said, "You know what you learn when you build things for a living?" Andrei looked at him. "Sometimes you get out there and the foundation ain't right. Maybe it was poured wrong. Maybe the ground shifted under it. Could have looked fine for years, looked solid, looked level. And underneath the whole thing was wrong." Walter picked up the sandpaper again, turned it once in his hands. A man who knows what he's doing, when he figures that out, he doesn't cry about it. He doesn't keep building on top of it and hope. He tears it down, gets back to good ground, builds the right one. He set the sandpaper down again. "That's not failure. That's just good sense." Andrei was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. They stayed on the porch another hour. The pigeon came back. Walter finished sanding the panel and fitted it against the frame of the birdhouse, checking the corner with his thumb the way he always did. Not because he doubted the measurement, but because he respected the process. Andrei sat in his car outside the house as the late afternoon light came down flat and gold across Walter's roof. He took out his phone. Camille picked up on the third ring. "Hey." "Hey." He leaned back against the headrest. "I just left my dad's." "How is he?" "Good. Building a birdhouse." A pause. "He said something to me." "What did he say?" Andrei repeated it. The foundation, the bad ground, the tearing down that wasn't failure. He said it simply, the way it had been said to him, without decoration. Camille was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your dad is a wise man." "He really is." Another pause. "Comfortable. The kind that didn't need filling." "I want to take you to dinner," Andrei said. "Not to talk about the case. Not to go over documents. Just dinner. You and me." On the other end of the line, he heard the small shift of her breath. "Yeah," Camille said. "I'd like that." Andrei hung up. He sat in the car for another moment, the engine off, the street quiet around him, the gold light slowly flattening into something softer. He was not thinking about Diane. He was not thinking about Troy or the civil claim or the deposition dates his attorney had emailed that morning. He was thinking about good ground. Then he started the car and drove home. The restaurant Camille chose was small and unhurried, the kind of place with cloth napkins and candles burned down to different heights, and a menu written on a chalkboard that changed every week. Not fancy, just considered. They ordered without rushing. The bread came. The wine came. Camille told a story about a client audit that had gone sideways in a way that was, in retrospect, almost funny, and Andre laughed. A real one, not the managed kind he had been producing for 2 years whenever the situation called for it. It was good. It was easy. It felt like something that had been waiting a long time to simply be allowed. Then the food arrived, and they ate, and the candle between them burned a little shorter, and Camille set her fork down and folded her hands on the table in the particular way she had when she was about to say something she had been thinking about carefully. Andre noticed. He always noticed. "There's something I've been sitting on," she said. "I found it during the reconstruction. I've been trying to figure out the right time to say it. Say it." She reached into her bag and took out her phone. She didn't hand it to him yet. She held it, screen down, and looked at him steadily. "It's an email," she said. "From Diane to Troy. Last year of the marriage. I found it in the secondary account when I was cross-referencing the LLC correspondence." She paused. "It's personal, Andre, not financial. I want you to know that before you read it." "Okay." She turned the phone over and opened the email and slid it across the table. Andre picked it up. The email was short. Troy had asked a question, direct, strategic, the way a man who had done this kind of thing before would ask it. Is he the type to cause problems? During the process, Diane's response was 4 sentences. He's not. He never fights back. He just takes it. That's always been his problem. Andre read it once, then he read it again. Not because he had missed anything, but because his mind, the precise structural part of it, wanted to be sure of exactly what he was holding. He set the phone down on the table. The candle flickered once. The restaurant moved quietly around them. Low voices, the scrape of a chair somewhere behind him, a server passing with a tray. All of it, distant. Andre sat with the words for a long moment. He was not thinking about Troy. He was not thinking about Diane's careful, flat handwriting on the divorce petition, or the years of small transfers, or the duplex sitting in a suburb somewhere, generating rent money she had built with his trust. He was thinking about the man at the dinner table, the one who had noticed things and said nothing, who had processed pain inwardly and called it patience, who had lain beside a woman who had already decided to leave and had chosen, night after night, to believe the foundation was sound. She wasn't wrong about that man. That was the part that settled into him quietly, without drama, without the burn of something unexpected. She had known exactly who he was. She had bet her entire scheme on it, on his steadiness reading as passivity, on his silence reading as surrender, on his refusal to perform his emotions reading as a man who had none worth worrying about. She had been right. Andre picked up the phone, looked at the email one more time, and handed it back to Camille. "She was right about who I was," he said. His voice was level, quiet. "She had no idea who I was becoming." Camille looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then she took the phone, closed the email, and set it face down on the table. She picked up her wine glass. He picked up his. They didn't make a toast. They just drank. The next 2 weeks moved with the clean, forward momentum of a man who had finished grieving and started building. Andre met with his attorney 3 times. The civil claim documents were thorough. Camille's forensic work had given them a backbone that was, in his attorney's words, unusually solid. The LLC, the duplex, The 8 years of systematic misdirection. It was organized, documented, and precise. It was the opposite of everything Diane had believed Andre capable of producing. He reviewed each document. He asked the right questions. He signed where he needed to sign. In between, he and Camille started planning the engagement dinner. Small, intentional. Walter, a few close friends. A date 3 weeks out. At a restaurant they both liked, with enough space at the table for the people who had actually shown up during the hard years. It was not a performance. It was a record. A marker of something real that had been built on ground worth building on. On a Thursday morning, 17 days after the dinner with Camille, Andre stood at the mailbox outside the post office on Clement Street with a single envelope in his hand. Inside it was the formal civil claim notification addressed to Diane Washington at her lease apartment. His attorney's office would send its own copy through proper channels. This one was extra. This one he had printed himself, sealed himself, and driven here himself. Not out of cruelty. There was no heat in it, no satisfaction in the small theatrical sense. It was simpler than that. This one act he had wanted to be his own. He dropped it in the slot. He heard it land. He walked back to his car. The restaurant was called Laurel. It had 12 tables, warm light, and a wine list written in someone's actual handwriting. Andre and Camille had eaten here twice before. Once when Camille was celebrating a case she'd worked for 11 months. Once when Andre had needed a good meal and good company and hadn't wanted to explain why. It felt right to mark this here. They arrived at 7. Walter was already seated, wearing the dark gray blazer he reserved for occasions he considered worth dressing for. He stood when they walked in, the way he always stood when his son entered a room, and he embraced Andre with both arms and then turned to Camille and took her hands in his the way older men do when they mean something and don't have a lot of extra words for it. "You look beautiful," he told her. "You say that every time," she said. "Because it's true. Every time." The other guests arrived in the next 15 minutes. 6 people total. Close friends, the kind who had shown up during the quiet years without being asked. The table was full and easy, the way tables get when everyone at them has actually earned their seat. The bread came. The wine came. The conversation moved without effort. Work. A story about Walter's birdhouse that had somehow expanded into a full architectural project over the past several weeks. Laughter that didn't need managing. Walter raised his glass midway through the first course. He didn't stand. He didn't clear his throat for effect. He just held up the glass and looked at his son and said, "You built something worth having. I'm proud of you." Then he looked at Camille. "Both of you." That was all. It was enough. Andre's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket during the second course. He felt it and ignored it. It buzzed again. He glanced down. Diane Washington. He excused himself from the table quietly and stepped toward the entrance hallway, away from the noise of the room. "Diane, I heard about the engagement." Her voice was composed, practiced. The voice she used when she had prepared what she was going to say, but was trying to make it sound like she hadn't. I think you need to slow down, Andre. It's been 2 years. It's been 23 months. That's the same thing." "It's not, but okay." He kept his voice even. "Is there something you need?" "I'm saying you're moving too fast. You're making a big decision, and I don't think you've given yourself enough time to—" "Diane." He said her name without sharpness. Just a period. "I moved exactly as fast as was right for me." A pause. "I just think—" "I appreciate the call," he said. "I have to get back to the table." He ended it. He stood in the hallway for a moment, then walked back and settled into his chair and picked up his wine. Camille glanced at him. He gave a small nod. "I'll tell you later." And she returned to the conversation without making anything of it. The dinner continued. 20 minutes later, the hostess touched his arm gently. "There's a woman at the entrance asking for you," she said. She says she knows you. Andre set his napkin on the table. He looked at Camille. Camille looked back at him, calm, clear-eyed, not surprised. Walter's expression didn't change. Neither of them moved. They understood without being told. Andre pushed back his chair and walked toward the front of the restaurant. Diane was standing just inside the entrance. She was dressed well. She had always known how to dress, and her posture was the composed, deliberate kind that costs something to maintain. She had her bag over one shoulder and her hands loose at her sides, and she was scanning the room until she found him. He reached her before she could move further in. "Let's go over here," he said, and he walked her to a quiet corner near the bar, away from the dining room, away from the table. His voice was not unkind. It was simply directional. They stood near two empty bar stools. The bartender was at the far end, occupied. The noise of the restaurant was behind them, distant, warm, continuing without them. Diane looked at him. She looked, if he was being honest, like someone who had driven here telling herself one thing and was now standing inside a different reality than the one she had rehearsed. Her eyes moved once toward the dining room, toward the table she couldn't fully see from here, and then back to him. She opened her mouth. Andre stood still. His hands were at his sides. His face was open, patient, without performance. He waited. He let her begin. Diane started with the word, "Listen." That was how Andre knew she had rehearsed it. People who haven't rehearsed don't start with listen. They start in the middle of whatever's hurting them. "Listen," she said. "I'm not here to make a scene. When Patricia told me, I thought, he needs to know that someone who cares about him is asking whether he's sure, whether he's actually thought this through." She paused. He didn't fill the silence. 2 years isn't a long time, Andre. Not really. Not for something like this. And I know how you are. You get focused on something, and you move forward, and you don't always stop to ask yourself if you're doing it for the right reasons or if you're just doing it because it feels like forward motion. She said how you are the way people say it, when they want to sound intimate but mean something closer to your problem. I'm not saying she's not a good person. I'm sure she is. I'm just saying, she paused again, recalibrating. I just wanted to understand. That's all. I wanted to hear from you that you're actually okay, that you've actually processed everything. She looked at him steadily when she finished. Her chin was level. Her hands were still. She had delivered it cleanly, and she knew it. Andre looked back at her. He had been standing with his weight evenly distributed, arms relaxed, the way he stood on job sites when he was about to tell someone what he actually saw. He took one breath, unhurried. "I know about the LLC," he said. Something shifted behind her eyes, fast, small, like a light switch in another room. "I know about the duplex in Fieldstone. I know you used the joint investment account to fund the down payment. I know the first transfer happened 8 years ago, 26 months into our marriage." He paused, just a beat. Before Troy, before any of it. Diane didn't speak. "I know about the email, the one where he asked if I was the type to cause problems." Andre's voice was the same temperature it had been all evening. Warm food, good wine, his father's toast. It did not change now. "And I know what you said back, that I never fight back, that I just take it, that it's always been my problem." The bar was quiet around them, glass on wood somewhere behind them, the soft rhythm of a room full of people enjoying their Tuesday evening. "You were right," he said, "about who I was." Diane's mouth opened slightly, closed. "I want you to know something." He kept his eyes on her. Not hard, not cold, just direct, the way a man looks at something he has already measured and accounted for. "I don't hate you. I haven't spent one day of the last 2 years trying to hurt you. That's not what this has been." He reached into his jacket pocket and straightened his cuff. An idle gesture, something to do with his hands that wasn't pointing or gesturing or any of the theatrical things people do when they want to perform how serious they are. There's a civil proceeding arriving at your address next week. The LLC, the duplex, the full financial reconstruction. It's all documented. My attorney has handled it thoroughly. He paused. I want to be clear. That is not revenge. It is a legal consequence of financial fraud, and my attorney will manage it without my emotional involvement. I won't be following it closely. I have other things to attend to. He looked at her for a moment. He let her have the silence. Then he said, You sat me down in our living room and told me you needed someone better, someone who could match where you were going. His voice was quiet, even. I didn't argue with you then. He held her gaze. I'm not arguing now. He let that land. I just want you to look at where we're both standing tonight, he said, and ask yourself whether you found him. He didn't wait for an answer. There wasn't one she could give that would change anything, and he had not asked the question because he needed her to respond. He had asked it because it was the truth, and the truth didn't require her confirmation. He turned and walked back through the warm light of the restaurant, past the bar, past the soft noise of other people's evenings, and settled into his chair between his father and his fiancée. Camille looked at him. He picked up his wine glass. Walter was mid-sentence about something, the birdhouse, the correct gauge of finishing nails, and André leaned in and listened like a man with nowhere else to be. Diane stood at the bar. She stood there for a long moment, one hand resting on the edge of the counter, her bag on her shoulder, her posture still composed in that way that was costing her more by the second. The bartender glanced her way. She didn't look at him. She looked once more toward the dining room. She could see the table from here, the light, the easy movement of people who were glad to be exactly where they were. Then she turned, and she walked out. The wedding happened on a Saturday in October. Backyard, folding chairs, string lights that Walter had spent the better part of Friday afternoon hanging with the same deliberate care he gave to everything he built. The yard smelled like cut grass and the pot roast Camille's aunt had been working on since dawn. Somebody's nephew kept running through the flower arrangement. Nobody minded. Walter stood at the front in a pressed shirt and the reading glasses he pretended he didn't need. He had printed the ceremony on index cards, 4 of them, in large, neat handwriting. He delivered it the way he did everything, without hurry, without performance, with the full weight of a man who meant every word. When he got to the part where he asked André if he took this woman, André said, I do, before Walter finished the sentence. Camille laughed. Walter shook his head slowly, the way fathers do when they're proud and won't say so directly. The small crowd laughed with her, and that was the whole ceremony, really. Not the words, but that moment. The laugh through the October air. The easy way André reached for Camille's hand. The fact that Walter had to pause and clear his throat before he could continue. It was not a performance. It was just real. And real, André had learned, was the only thing worth building toward. The civil proceeding concluded 3 months before the wedding. The settlement was significant. Camille's forensic reconstruction, clean, thorough, legally unimpeachable, had documented 8 years of financial misdirection with the kind of precision that leaves no room for argument. The duplex in Fieldstone, the asset Diane had spent years quietly building with money that was partly André's, became a contested item in the resolution. She did not keep it outright. The equity she had accumulated, the rental income she had collected, all of it entered the accounting. All of it was addressed. Troy's name on the LLC made him jointly liable. His attorney had advised settlement from the moment he reviewed Camille's documentation. Troy complied, quickly, and without the charm that usually got him through difficult situations, because charm has limited utility when the paper trail is that clean. The settlement cost him. Not just money. The proceedings moved through normal legal channels, the way these things do, and the details reached people in the same professional real estate circles where Troy had spent years building his reputation. Two of his development partnerships dissolved within 6 weeks of the settlement becoming known. A third deal, a mixed-use project he had been negotiating for 8 months, fell through when the other party quietly withdrew. Troy relocated to another city 4 months later. He told people it was for opportunity. The people who knew him understood it differently. Patricia called Diane on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the deposition. Diane answered, expecting the version of her mother she had always been able to rely on. The one who softened things, who found the angle where love was still operational. She did not get that version. Patricia's voice was steady, measured, the way it got when she was saying something she had been sitting with for a long time and had decided, finally, to stop sitting with. "I want you to know that I love you," Patricia said. "That's not what this call is about." A pause. "I'm ashamed, Diane, not of the divorce. Your marriage was yours to end. But the method, the years of it, the planning, the money." Patricia stopped. "Then, that man gave you a good life, and you treated it like a transaction." Diane opened her mouth. She didn't say anything. Patricia didn't fill the silence either. She let it sit there between them, honest and heavy, the way uncomfortable truths tend to sit when the person saying them refuses to take them back. There was nothing Diane could offer, no framing that changed the timeline, no explanation that addressed 8 years of deliberate financial misdirection. She knew this, and Patricia, who had raised her, knew that she knew. The call ended shortly after, politely, lovingly even, in the way Patricia loved, without softening the thing she needed to say. Patricia began spending Sundays with Andre and Camille 2 months later. She brought food. She stayed long. She asked about Andre's projects, listened when Camille talked about her work, and accepted, without drama or announcement, that this was where family was being built now. Grandchildren were coming. Patricia was not willing to miss that for the sake of pride. Andre's firm completed the community center in November, a low-income neighborhood on the east side of the city that had needed something like it for a long time. The building was solid, warm, with good light in the main hall and structural choices that prioritized longevity over aesthetics. It would still be standing in 50 years. Andre had designed it that way on purpose. His partners put his name on the plaque near the entrance. He hadn't asked. He didn't argue. Diane lived in the lease apartment. She was employed. She was stable. She was not destroyed. She was simply reduced, in the particular quiet way of someone whose carefully constructed plan had collapsed not through bad luck, but through its own dishonesty. The duplex was gone. The financial cushion she had spent years assembling had been significantly depleted by the settlement. Troy was in another city with someone else's name in his phone. The life she had left to find had never materialized. She did not call Patricia on Sundays anymore. She understood, without being told directly, that Sunday afternoons were no longer hers to occupy. On a Sunday evening in December, Andre sat on the porch of the house he and Camille had chosen together. A corner property with a deep yard and good bones, the kind of place a structural engineer knows how to look at honestly. His father's voice came through the phone, unhurried, mid-story about a neighbor's fence and what it said about the neighbor's character. Andre listened. He had his feet up on the porch rail and a cup of coffee going cold on the side table, and the winter air was clean and still around him. Through the screen door behind him came Camille's laugh, full and easy, the sound of a woman completely at home, followed by her aunt's voice rising to meet it, followed by the particular warm noise of a house where people were glad to be. Andre looked out at the yard. The string lights from the wedding were still up. He hadn't taken them down. He wasn't sure he would. His father was still talking. Andre leaned back in his chair and listened, and let the evening be exactly what it was. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.